and welcome to episode 5. I think it's 5 of Tech and Test. With me today is Andrew Knight, the Automation Panda. Andrew, hello.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me, Peter.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on the show. I hope I've not taken too much time out of your schedule.
Not at all.
Brilliant. And I obviously know you. I think I saw you at PyCon US a few years ago.
Hmm.
But could you just tell the Tech and Test audience of who you are?
Sure thing. So I am frequently known as the Automation Panda. For about a decade, I was your rank and file software engineer and test, coming up from college grunt to leading teams to achieve testing excellence. I spent a little bit of time in developer relations with Applitools, where I was also director of Test Automation University. But for almost a year now, I have been the principal architect at a company named Cycle Labs, where I'm helping to build out a test automation platform that focuses on supply chain and warehouse management systems.
Awesome. And what made you move into that kind of role, move away from becoming an estet?
It's a great question. I mean, honestly, I don't feel like I moved away from becoming an SDET or a software development engineer and test or whatever we want to call them. Because what does an SDET do? They build solutions to testing problems, right? They're essentially a developer at heart. They're using all their developer like skills and applying them in a particular domain that is not web development or embedded or whatnot. It is the domain of testing, and really my current role as principal architect at Cycle Labs is essentially just that. It's just now that on my resume or my LinkedIn profile, I fall under the developer category more than the tester category. But it's very similar kind of stuff. I mean, we're looking how do we scale? We're looking at building dashboards. We're looking at all those kinds of aspects that would be very common to an SDET.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So there's a lot of buzz going around with large language models and artificial intelligence, right? What's your experience, or how do you think the role of an estet is going to change within this
Mm.
new landscape?
I think it's exciting. There are some people who love it. There are some people who are naysayers and hate it. I think it's ultimately going to become just another tool in the box, right? The way in which I see testers and specifically STETs really benefiting from these generative AI technologies would be things like helping to more quickly code up test scripts, for example. Things like GitHub Copilot that can kind of boilerplate some code for you, um, that sort of thing. Or, for example, let's say you were familiar most with Python as a language, but then you were put on a project where you had to do C sharp. You know how to program, but you don't necessarily know all the syntax and stuff. So a tool like ChatGPT or whatever else is going to succeed it in the future, who knows? But those kinds of tools can be like, hey, I want to write a test that kind of does this, but I need to do it in this other language that I'm not so familiar with. Beep, bop, boop. It can help get you through 80 to 90% of that. So I see that being very helpful.
Cool.
I also,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I also see some other applications for the kinds of tools that will be available to an SDET. Things like better automated analysis of test results, right? If we're trying to push who knows how many countless tests continuously, we all know that the consequence of that is the triage burden. Well, let's try to clamp down on that. um, and I mean, there's a bunch of other little cool things I think generative technologies will do to be able to refine the processes that we're already trying to complete.
Got it. So you've worked in test automation or within testing for some time, right? It's not been a couple of years. I imagine it's more than that.
Yeah. I mean, I started coding in 2002. I can say I first started doing proper testing, not just debugging or try it and see what happens, but like true testing as a practice in 2007. That was during my first internship. And honestly, I've been in that space ever since, arguably.
Cool.
Been
So
a long time.
what are some of the sort of common challenges you think teams face when starting out with their test automation journey?
Oh my gosh, the challenges that teams face. They are manifold. Yeah, so in no particular order, skills first and foremost. I've been through companies big and small. I've consulted, I've trained, I've been at conferences, I've talked with so many people. Um, one common thing I see is that teams want to start automating their tests, but they don't necessarily have the skills or know how to do
Mm.
that. Classically, when we would say test automation, it was basically like a developer job, right? You would get your open source tools and frameworks like, you'd pair up Java, Cucumber with Selenium or something, right? And boom, you'd have to go build a project around that, And so for classic testers, your more old school testers, they may not even know how to do programming,
Mm.
right? And now they're being threatened, oh, well, your job depends upon you not only learning, programming, but to do test automation successfully. And those, oh my gosh, those initiatives, your mileage may vary, right? So that is a huge um, challenge I've seen, trying to get not just like a team, but entire teams within an organization up to speed with coding, with version control, with Git, with continuous integration, pipelines, with and all that, just so that they can start to do test automation, right? I've seen so that issue first and foremost. I've seen the issue of um, adding tests endlessly without concern about how you're going to run them. And what
Mm.
I mean by that is, from my perspective, if you're going to automate tests, you need to be executing them regularly through some sort of continuous integration system, right? If that means that they're running after every code commit, cool. If that means that you run a subset of them after every code commit, but then you have the rest of them going nightly, cool, right? If that means that because you're so big and slow, you're only running them like once or twice a week, fine, as long as there's some regular cadence that you consider frequent, right? What you shouldn't have happen is you have a team go off and automate hundreds to thousands of tests that never actually get run,
Right.
right? That maybe they get run once a release cycle, and a release cycle is like every 6 months. You're like, oh gosh, why? What? This is pointless. Why are we spending all this investment in automation to not get the frequency out of it,
Right.
right? I
Yeah.
I think it's better to have 10 tests running, good tests running continuously and reliably, than 100 that are not. you know? Um,
Definitely, definitely. So,
mhm.
I guess like how do you balance the need for like speed and test automation, like getting tests automated really quickly versus the importance of like thorough test coverage? Because I think there's always a focus on how many tests can you automate, and people like
Mm,
stats and they sort of maybe count tickets or count tests, and these things should not be done, but they end up being done.
number
um,
driven development.
so how do we sort of balance that with making, counteracting that and ensuring the right coverage happens when people are counting
Mm,
tickets or looking at test automation from a very high level where one
yeah.
ticket, another ticket, the complexity is maybe not looked at, but they're just counting metrics.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if I could, I try to recast that issue more of prioritization of coverage, because at the end of the day, no matter how much you cover, people going to want more. People going to want you to develop faster, to be able to run it faster, to run it more frequently, right? There's always that next level of scale that you can hit, and rather than try to get burned out by that, I think the way I've always tried to treat it is to say, okay, what are the most important things I want covered with a set of automated tests, and let me do that really well, right? And
Right.
so even if it's like, a prioritization of like 1 through 100 in terms of your features or your tickets, or maybe it's like you have tiers, like, these are high priority, mid priority, low priority, and then you tackle the high. If you get all the high done, then you move to the mid. And I think what that enables a team to do is think more in terms of the value they get out of every ounce of test automation they do, right? Because even if a team is slow at developing, right? If they can handle, half of all of their high priority tests, well, that's better than zero. That's better than a quarter. And if that's running somewhat continuously, it's delivering value, right? And so there is market progress being made in that sense, right? So it's not like you didn't meet some arbitrary goal of metrics of numbers of tests or loose definition of coverage, but you got done, let's say 24 tests that we consider to be exercising core behavioral paths through the system, and they're running, with every code commit, or they're running 3 times a day during business hours. Like, oh, that's fine. What does that free me up to do in terms of my business? Well, I don't have to manually grind through that all the time. So that frees up my time to write more tests. That frees up my time to do a little bit of exploratory stuff on the side, or to stay on top of triage when things blow up, so I'm not working overtime. All very good things.
They sound good. Um, Tooling. I want to talk about tooling with you. So tooling's, it has become a little bit religious where people select particular tools. I've got a whole bunch of books, right, from WebDriver.io to Playwright to, I don't think a book on Playwright, but there's a whole bunch of different tools available. And some people say use tools which are well and trusted and have stood the test of time. Then you have folks which go, no, you need to use innovative tools that are modern and constantly generating and changed and supported by big, large organizations, right? So just from, I guess I'm curious to know what kind of tools and frameworks you recommend. And these, when I mean tools, of course, we can develop our own in-house tools. I'm talking about tools which are open source and available and can speed up development for transformation.
Sure. Great question. You're right. There's a plethora of tools, frameworks, whatever buzzword you want to put out there, available to us, which in years past, that may not have been true.
Mhm.
When it comes to picking tools or frameworks on any particular project, I have my opinions about my preferences and what I like. But I also recognize that whatever team or company or organization may have different needs that don't align with my own preferences. And I'd like to think I'm mature enough to be okay with that. So I never want to say like, oh gosh, just use Playwright for everything because it's like the best thing ever, right? It may not be the best for different teams with different needs. So I have to kind of cop out and give a bit of a it depends answer.
Sure.
But what I can do is, first of all, I can share kind of the thought processes that I go through when recommending tools or picking tools, and then I can also share my personal preferences on things, recognizing those two may be separate. So personally, as a what you would consider like your classic SDET, I tend to favor open source tools over proprietary tools, right? So in whatever language you're working in, there's always going to be some sort of open source test framework, the thing that is the driver, the runner. It helps you structure test cases and then lines them up like dominoes and knocks them over to run them. So in Python, you'd have something like PyTest. In Java, you'd have something like JUnit or TestNG. C Sharp, you're looking at NUnit, XUnit, MS Test, right? And honestly, at the end of the day, most of these frameworks are pretty much the same. They're all doing the same kind of thing. There are a little bit of quirks and stuff. Some are better than others, let's be honest. I think PyTest is one of the best, but that's a whole nother story. We're getting into preferences, right? When it comes to the specific packages or libraries in order to um, manipulate systems under test, right? Again, you have your gamut of open source tools, right? A lot of people think immediately of web browser-based testing because that seems to be so pervasive these days. Like everything's a web app, right? So like classically, you've got Selenium, you've got Cypress, now you've got Playwright, you got WebDriver.io out there. They're, in my opinion, they're all good, right? They're the pros and cons to each. If there is a team that is just getting started with test automation and they're kind of new to it, I would probably recommend one of the more modern web test frameworks, things like Playwright or Cypress over something like Selenium. And not to say because Selenium is bad or something, but what Playwright and Cypress offer to you is, first of all, they're full all-in-one frameworks. They're not just the browser engine like Selenium is. But moreover, Playwright and Cypress do things for you, right? They have automatic weighting built in, right? They have a higher level syntax. They handle cross-browser testing out of the box, right? They provide these awesome UI modes that help you visually step through and debug your tests, right? All these quality of life features that are given to you for free out of the box. Whereas
Right.
if you were to pick Selenium as your browser automation engine, you kind of have to do it yourself, right? Now, there are plenty of Selenium-based frameworks out there. You know, like WebDriver IO is it's not Selenium, part of the Selenium project, but it is a JavaScript implementation of WebDriver standards, plus a lot of the extra goodies on top. Or things like in Java, there's Selenide. Or if you want to take what's it called? A more BDD screenplay path, you could do something like Serenity BDD, which kind
Mhm.
of wraps up around Selenium. So there's options with Selenium out there, but again, it's kind of like, you know, tons of smaller things out there. Um, your API testing tools, I mean, again, so be it. Like there's libraries for calling APIs in every language. You can even get like a dedicated tool like Postman. I haven't used Postman myself, but I've seen it and I poked it and I'm like, that's cool. I probably wouldn't use it because I'd rather have something where I can have my API calls and my UI calls together in one project,
Yeah.
so that, you know, I could, in doing my end-to-end tests, I could, you know, preload data through the API using same REST requests and stuff, and then do my dance through the UI to exercise the app. Magic, right? Um, so that's kind of how I would recommend people go about like picking, right? There's going to be the communities have largely decided for you if you want to take an open source path, right?
Right. Right. So, Andrew, I've looked at your blog, and you met. There's a lot of blog posts on BDD, or has been in the past, right?
True story.
So, so in going down the BDD route, is it important to get the process right first, or do you start with the tooling first?
It depends what your goals are. So I have a purist answer and a pragmatic answer to that. Um, I will preface to say I think behavior-driven development is a wonderful thing. I know it has a love-hate relationship with a lot of people. I'm very much in the love camp. I think it's great. Um, and I think it's especially great if you do follow a behavior-driven mindset. That it's not just you're slapping given when then keywords onto existing tests, but you're actually trying to shift the way you think about software development. And that's why I like to think about it more as the behavior-driven mindset versus some hardcore development process. Um, and in that, what I mean is, if you put the behaviors you're trying to develop first in everything you do, right? When we talk about behaviors, the things that an application does, like features, right? You know, if like logging into an app, adding items to your shopping cart, doing checkout, uploading files, right? These are all behaviors within an application that are not existing for the sake of having software to exist. They exist to bring value to human users, right? Software is for humans. We use software to optimize our processes that we're trying to do, right? That's what brings value to us. It's supposed to make us more efficient. It's supposed to make us more productive, be able to handle more things, be able to communicate farther distances, to be able to buy things we could never have access to before, right? The software behaviors should improve our quality of life as humans, right? Software works for us. We don't work for software. And so if we keep that in mind of, oh, we're trying to build value for people in whatever we're trying to build, put that in as the driving force in your software development process, everything else falls into place, right? You find like, okay, well, if I'm trying to build this thing, I'm going to put my effort and time and money into building it as a software company, so that someone else can value. There better be a return on the other side. So then, gosh, I better make sure I do a good job, right? So you become more careful about how you design your behaviors. You become more intentional about developing the right things, about squashing misunderstandings and miscommunications. And what you find is that if you put behaviors first, everything else follows. The code, the tests, they're all a consequence, right? Like, oh, right. So that's what I mean by BDD. And so if we make this a development process, really, it's not about like following rigid rules. It's about adding practices that are helpful in always orienting us back into that behavior driven mindset. Right. And so I think things like story mapping, example mapping, and
Mhm.
question storming, bringing three amigos together, all of that in terms of like the process of collaboration that BDD preaches is absolutely invaluable, right? Because it's either you're going to do that early in your development process and get all the answers straight, or you're going to find out the hard way later when you did it wrong. Very rarely do you constantly hit home runs and get it right. At least consistently. You might get it right every once in a while, but consistently? No. So we preload our process, handling the collaboration early, get everyone on the same page, develop shared artifacts that then help us with the turning our inspiration into implementation, right? And so yes, the process is very helpful there. But at the same time, when it comes to like the tools and such we have for BDD, most of those tools tend to focus on the automation side, right?
Right.
Like the Cucumber test framework, right? I some companies have tried to make the collaboration tools for BDD, and they just haven't really caught on. They haven't really been successful. But man, like Cucumber is everywhere. Man, they're doing bad things with Cucumber if you dig deep enough. Like, wow. And I know a lot of the BDD purists would say you should never use Cucumber just as a test framework, especially not without the process. And I'm just like, well, time out. One thing that's really nice about Cucumber and its similar frameworks is that it enables teams to develop a domain specific language for testing so that, hey, I can write my steps in plain language and then I can reuse them. And testing is very, very repetitive,
Mm.
right? How many times do you need to log into the app? How many times do you need to set a particular field, right? Oh, well, man, if I could just make these steps, it forces me to write them in a reusable way, and then I can just reuse them and call the steps again. And wow, that's actually a pretty good idea for a test framework. And that's why it caught on like wildfire. Most people at my theory at least, is that most people gravitated towards Gherkin-based test frameworks, not because they wanted to do BDD, but because they saw the advantages of a domain-specific language for testing. And
Right.
so in that sense, can you be successful with test automation using a BDD framework without doing BDD collaborative processes? And I would say, yes, you can. It may not be ideal, but you can be successful. And I back that up to say at a previous company, that's exactly what I did. I I went in, I was their first SDET, and they wanted me to make the automation magic happen. I'm like, okay. And so they were a .NET shop, so I did it C Sharp, Selenium, SpecFlow, right? SpecFlow being BDD for .NET. And initially, it was me just writing my tests in Gherkin, running them with SpecFlow, kind of almost off of my own island, right? Very not BDD, right? But why are you using SpecFlow? Well, after a year or so, people saw how good the test automation was, and they're like, wow, how did you do that? And I was like, well, here, let me tell you more about this BDD thing. And before you know it, we started doing example mapping sessions and being conscious about including three amigos in meetings. And so from starting with a BDD automation tool, I was able to work leftward, so to speak. I was able
Mhm.
to shift left and bring a more behavior driven mindset to the whole team. Mic
Awesome.
drop.
Brilliant. No, that's exactly my experience as well with seeing sometimes BDD, the tooling starting to happen, right? And the process maybe lagging behind, which tends to happen when people experiment with something and create a proof of concept, and you always
Mhm.
end up with the process or lagging. Um, so I just want to know, like, how do you? So thinking about you working in teams, right? um how do you foster a culture of quality or engage like with collaboration with like the development team? What kind of challenges or tips or tricks you'd say are quite important, or with sort of integrating within a dev team and doing testing within a dev team, or maybe being in a separate QA or SDET team and still having that interaction engagement? What kind of things work and what doesn't really work in terms of fostering that culture of quality?
Great question. Um, I mean, we got to recognize that quality is something you build into the product from the start. The activity of testing is not what improves quality. It just kind of reveals the quality that's already there. And so the royal we as tester roles, um, we really have two mechanisms for improving quality. One of which is to do the testing activity, after the thing's been built, find all the issues in it, and then report that back to the developer side in the presumption that evidence of badness will inspire fixes for goodness, right?
Right.
And this maintaining of the quality feedback loop really only works if we have rapport with those developing the system. And so in that sense, if that's the mechanism, then the most important thing you can do as a tester to improve the quality and to build quality like that is to build rapport with your development counterparts so that when you raise issues, they trust you, right? They don't shoo you off and say, no, it's working as designed, or nah, that's not going to be a problem. No user would ever do something like that, right? And so the ways that you can build rapport is make sure you bring good feedback and not useless feedback, right? If you're nitpicking certain things, nobody likes that, right? Yeah, it may not be perfect, but like there's a prioritization to the kind of feedback you should be bringing back, right? Uh, Trying to make sure you foster an attitude of being on the same team versus an us versus them, right?
Mhm.
You don't want this war over the fence going on. Throw a bug over, and they throw a fix back, and why are they doing this? Right? None of that. Um, and another thing is to show that you are technically capable, right? That you have a deeper understanding of the system or the process or the user or all the above, right? That you do have this deep well of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom that could be beneficial to understanding what is going on, right? A lot of times developers might dismiss testers if they don't know anything. And so I think if you're in a tester role, you really need to combat that. Right? It can be tough if you're on a new project or you're fresh out of college or something, but you have to build up that expertise somehow, right? And that will lead into you um, building that rapport, right? So those are the kinds of things I think like building that rapport, very, very impactful on how the feedback that you provide on quality is received, because ultimately that's what's going to come out. The other mechanism is to shift left. Like you've got to be more involved in the development process from the start. And development is not just coding, right? Development is the whole
Right.
process of inspiration to implementation, right? So it's important to make sure that you're in those discussions and meetings when there are requirements being discussed, right? When there are designs being drawn, um, when plans of action are being made, because what you can do, that is your chance to be the force that can build quality into those designs and ideas and inspirations, right? If you see something that's going to turn out really bad, you can catch it early then versus catch it when you test it at the end, right? Um,
Right.
and there's all you need for that is common sense and awareness,
Hmm.
right? You don't need to have coding skills to do that, though coding skills might help you do analysis there, right? Um, but that's the whole three amigos thing, or the shift left, right? Getting involved in being a contributor to those earlier stages, you can actually have an impact in building quality into the product.
Cool. Definitely. Um, so I'm just thinking back, because you sort of graduated and you ended up in like a dev role, right? Um, I guess what kind of made you stay in test automation instead of moving to just a pure development role?
That's a great question. Yeah, so for a little bit of clarity on my history, when I was an intern, I did a computer science major in
Right.
college. I had known I wanted to do programming software since I was just starting high school. I was like, this is amazing. I picked up a calculator, programmed it. Wow, I can make money doing this. No way. Right. Um, did the CS major, had to do internships. I did all my internships with IBM. That's what brought me to North Carolina. And um, when I was in my role at IBM, I did testing, I did development, I did build meistering, the whole shebang bang. But when I was hired, post college, first like real job, full time, um, I would pretty much it was pretty much like a testing job and focused more on automation. And I kind of churned and burned through a decade of that, just being, your STET, which I mean, yeah, it is a developer for testing. So, um,
Sure.
but back in it was 2016, um, I was a mid-level uh, software test engineer at a startup, and at that point, I had been at a couple different companies. I'd always done testing and primarily focused on automation. I was kind of like what I was developing my expertise in. And by this point, I had kind of felt like I may not be the most expert, I may not be the most senior person, but I feel like I've cultivated a valuable knowledge and understanding of this space, of what it means to develop good test automation. And I'd been through horrible projects, had to learn recommended practices the hard way of iterating through, seeing what worked, trying the next best thing, right? Um, and I felt like that was really formative for my professional experience. And I kept seeing at different places that other people didn't have the insights that I had, if that makes sense. That I had learned something a little bit deeper than most people were
Mhm.
aware of. And I was like, oh, so maybe I've got something special here, right? And I think it's not like I was something special. It's anyone who progresses in their career, they start to go deep in certain areas, right?
Sure.
A lot of people end up going deep into like web dev or like front end or back end. Some people get really deep into embedded systems. Some people get really deep into like AI and machine learning. It's my deeper path ended up just being testing and automation by virtue of that's what I'm working on. Hey, I'm curious about this. Hey, I'm going to try to make this better. Boom. But anyway, so I go back to this company in 2018, or sorry, 2016, because due to reasons, uh, a vice president at this company decided that he was going to lay off everyone in the company who had tester in their title.
Right.
This was like a 300-person company. The engineering team was probably like 60, 70 people total. But yeah, if you were a tester, you would be gone. But for some reason, he spared me. And I'm like, what? And basically, on layoff day, he brought me in with my manager and said, okay, Andy, your current testing team is gone, but you are not. What we're going to do is we're going to reassign you to this other team over here that's been screwing up royally. You're going to help them get their testing and quality back on track. And then what we're going to do is we're going to train you up to be a .NET front end developer. And I was like, what? like, like, like earthquake happens. The whole understanding I had of this company is gone, and I'm being told that I'm now going to be put on a track to become a capital D developer. And so I had to sit with that. I'm like, okay, so if I wanted to be a regular developer, this could be the fork in my professional path to make that switch. That it would be easy now. Because like if I wanted to do that by trying to get a job at another company, they look at my background as a tester and be like, oh, I'm not sure you're a good fit for this role. But here's like right within a company saying you're going to do this. And that means they're going to give me the time and the resources to learn what it means to become a .NET front end developer. And I'm like, is that what I really want to do?
Mm.
And that didn't really settle well with me because I was like, well, look, I already have what I believe to be a critical expertise on the subject of testing and specifically in automation. And I get the sense that this is uncommon and might even be rare. Hmm. Whereas if I go to become this .NET developer, I'm basically hitting the reset button on 6 years of
Mm.
professional experience since college,
Right.
right? So I'd lose that level of seniority likely. I mean, I'd probably be able to catch up faster than a new college grad, but still, you know, um, I'd have to go learn entirely new things rather than go deeper into what I'm already learning, what I've already demonstrated interest in, um, and at a company where they're willing to lay off a gigantic
Mm.
chunk of their workforce for seemingly arbitrary to me reasons.
Yeah.
I'm like, and so I decided in that moment to double down on the path of testing and automation. I promptly left that company and found a new position at a different company where I got my first senior level title. Um, and it was shortly after joining that new company that I decided to launch my blog, automationpanda.com. The rest is history.
Wow. So that was the pivotal moment where
Mhm.
you were given oh, I can't speak. You were given the choice of moving to
Mhm.
dev, and you just kind of really realized what you liked about your current role,
Mhm.
and the experience you'd gained was actually valuable, right?
Yes. Yes. It was the first moment in my career, looking back, where I really put myself in the driver's seat. I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, they let their careers happen to them,
Right.
right? Like when you like if you're on the like college student track, like I was, where you somehow in your teenage years you realize programming is cool and you go to college and get some sort of computer science, software engineering, IT major, right? And then you come out into the real world and you're just like, I'll do anything in computers as long as I make money, right? And then you try different things and eventually through that you kind of figure out like, okay, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to pursue. But in those stages, it's like it's kind of like your career happens to you, right? It's kind of arbitrary that you got your resume in front of this person over here at this company and they picked you up and you started working for them, right? And then you got certain experiences on the way that you would never have predicted for yourself, right? Um, and so that kind of happened to me. Like I would never have post college guessed that I was going to become this deeply involved in testing and automation.
Mm.
If you had told me that, I would have been like, wow, I'm going to avoid that, right? Because college kids don't really know anything, right? But but yeah, like all the companies I had before, it was kind of like a give me a job, get me out of this hellhole, give me the better job. And then at this moment, it was like, okay, I have a choice to make. Do I stay or do I go? And I was like, you know what? It's time for me to get into the driver's seat. I now know what I want to do for the foreseeable future of my career. And I'm going to deliberately seek a better opportunity for that for myself. And not only am I going to seek the better opportunity in terms of an employer, but I'm going to deliberately make new opportunities for myself independently, right?
Nice. Really cool. So what advice would you give to Andrew who just, graduated from school now and was looking for a role?
Ooh, ooh, what advice would I give to myself? Um, oh my gosh. I wish I knew then what I know now. Oh man. Um, I would say don't give up when things get hard. Um, it's it's not often talked about, but
Mm.
the software field in whatever kind of role you do, in whatever space of it you're in, can be very, very difficult and arguably unfair. There are a lot of people who burn out and drop out. There are a lot of people who are, for lack of a better word, abused in software. Whether that's that people are just being mean jerks, whether people are being like racist or sexist or whatever, right? It takes a high level of grit and tenacity to succeed. to persevere. And I think that's true regardless of background, though some people may have a harder time than others because of situations. But I would say to myself as well as to others, like, don't give up. Keep going. Just because you had to deal with a jerk doesn't mean that your whole career path was wrong, right? Um, don't throw in the towel so quickly. Um, if you feel like you have the spark for this, it's worth persevering. And to hear that encouragement, I
Mm.
think would have been very important to myself, as well as I'm guessing to many other people out there as well. I mean, there was a point like within my first year of employment, post college, I was seriously debating, do I give up on this because this sucks and go back to college and pursue a PhD and try to become a college professor? Like, I called up my master's thesis professor and had this conversation. And thank goodness he had good advice. He was like, Andy, you can come back to university, spend 5 years as a pauper, making like eating ramen noodles on a stipend, only to hope to graduate with a PhD, hope to get a professorship somewhere, and make less than you do today in your current salary.
Right.
Or you can go get a new job at a different company. And I was like, dang. Oh, right. So to hear encouragement like that at the right times from the right people, um, absolutely critical. So um, that's what I would tell my earlier self.
Really cool. Really cool advice. I'd almost want like a little poster of that. um, really cool. Thank you, Angie, for sharing and for being vulnerable about that. Um, so the testing field, tech field is changing a lot, right? There's constantly amazing courses, as you would know, Andrew, being an instructor on some of these courses. But how do you, or how stay up to date with industry trends or
Mm.
latest developments and advances in test automation, right? So yeah, I'm kind of keen on what you do to stay up to date.
Sure, it's a great question. So the number one thing I do is I get involved in community. Um, there are many tech communities out there. I know you and I met in person through the Python community. I'm very involved in Python community still, but I'm also very involved in the testing community all around the world. So I would say go to events, go to conferences, go to meetups, meet people locally in your area, meet people around the world, right? And as you start to get involved in community in that way, you're going to start connecting with people on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, well, now X, whatever, right? And honestly, I find that is the best way to keep a pulse on all the things happening, right? Because if there's any new trends or tools or frameworks, there's going to be talks on that at these events, right? Hey, which tools should I use? Selenium, Cypress, or Playwright? Well, I don't know, but that guy knows, and he's giving a talk on it. Let's go listen. Hopefully, he's not too opinionated, right? And then it's not just the community starts and ends at a conference or at an event. Like I said, you connect with people. You keep up with them on LinkedIn when they get new jobs. You ask how it's going. You say congrats. You get virtual coffees. Like kind of like what we're doing now. This is essentially like a virtual coffee that we're just recording as a podcast. Amazing, right? Because we knew each other from community. Um, if you get involved in community, then all the other things will start to trickle out of that. Um, I try to stay away from like flame wars and stuff, though. That's some people out there are jerks. You identify them quickly and then you stay away, right? Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think like what else would I do to stay up on things like LinkedIn? Well, that's community. Events, that's community. Yeah, community.
Cool. Community works, and this is community, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, great. And Andrew, we're coming to the end, so just want to know what your future goals are, right? And this could be like it could be test automation, right? Or it could
Mm-hmm.
be what you'd like to see yourself do in the industry, even in the next
Mm-hmm.
X years. I don't know. What are
That's a
your
great
goals?
question. So professionally, I think I want to stay in the testing and automation space for the foreseeable future. I don't see that changing. Um,
Awesome.
in terms of career progression, I want to continue to have an increasing impact on the way testing and specifically automation is done in our industry. Um, that's what really drew me to the current position I'm in at Cycle Labs to be their principal architect. Right, like I was trusted to come up with and deliver a new product vision for where the Cycle platform needs to go, and to be given resources to go build that, which is really cool. So it's like it's not just me in a bubble. I've got my team, right? Um, and so we're going to build Cycle to be one of the most excellent test automation platforms y'all have ever seen. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of hard work and probably a number of mistakes on the way, but we'll get there, right? And so those kinds of opportunities to me right now are very, very enticing. So I'm hoping I can stay at Cycle Labs for a good long run and bring this into fruition. Um, I don't think I have ambition to become some sort of like manager or director, at least not yet. Um, the way I view it right now is at this current stage, I'm more keenly interested in technology problems over people problems. That may change, and if the time comes for me to say take some direct reports, and become a manager or whatever, I I would probably be okay with that. It's just that's not something I'm actively seeking. It's like if it happens, great.
Got it.
Um, yeah. So who knows? Maybe someday I'll launch my own company. Maybe someday I'll finally write that book. We'll find out.
And speaking of books, are you reading anything?
Oh my gosh. There was a book I read recently. Um, it was it was the Cosmic Python book. Um, I forget the real title of it, but basically it's from Harry Percival and oh gosh, I forget the name of his co-author. But essentially it's the domain-driven design book for Python. If you Google Cosmic Python, you'll end up at the book, the website, all of that. And I read that shortly after onboarding at my current company because, like, okay, we're going to be developing a whole lot of web-based systems here.
Mhm.
What are some better patterns that I can use to develop that? Because I've done like basic CRUD apps before. That's nothing. I've done basic web services. I was like, I want something that's going to be scalable,
Mm.
And so I read that book. And it's like, oh my gosh, this domain-driven design stuff is pretty eye-opening. Things like repository pattern and unit of work and CQRS. I'm just like, whoa, right? Light bulbs going off. And so that was really good for me, coming into my current role to read that book. Um, that's what I've read recently.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This was fun to catch up and to chat.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too. Bye bye.
Hey.